Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm very glad to be able, or that the University of Oslo again is able to host the IG Nobel Show. So before I give the word to Marc, I would like to, I think we should all thank the sponsors, which is the Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Sciences, the Institute for Mathematics. The library has been amazing here in trying to help us organize this event. And the Forskningsforbundet has been providing all the popcorn you're eating. So I think we should give them a big hand. So with that, I think we're all ready for this year's IG Nobel Show, and it's a great pleasure to again introduce Marc Abrahams and this year's crew for this kind of show. So you're welcome, Marc.
Thank you, Andreas. Thanks for coming. I am Marc Abrahams. I'm the editor of a magazine called The Annals of Improbable Research, and I founded a thing called the IG Nobel Prize Ceremony. Some of you know all about it, some of you don't. You'll see all sorts of things. Before we do much else, I want to show you a very short video. And can we have the sound turned up on the machine, please? Okay. I already have shown you a short video, but I'll show you another one. There we go.
A British man who took on a goat's eye view of the world has been rewarded for his efforts.
Because we're all completely trapped inside our own brain and our own perception of the world. Well,
I can't make this stuff up. Thomas Thwaites had a set of prosthetic legs built and spent 3 days living among goats in the Alps. He did it because he wanted a simpler life. And he says it was fascinating, a little bizarre though. Thwaites co-won an IG Nobel Prize for biology with another man who tried living as several different animals. The IG Nobel Awards. The IG Nobel Awards honor research that may seem bizarre or amusing, but actually provokes thought. Don't watch the video. You try and read that script. I need a Kleenex.
You guys. Well, we're looking for quite the game tomorrow for the Bombers.
Yes, we are. No goats invited to McMahon Stadium.
That was a television news report from Winnipeg, Canada. That's what the citizens of Winnipeg, Canada saw on the news when they turned to it the night after the IG Nobel Prize. And that was a report about one of this year's IG Nobel winners. I'll give you a little more detail on that and some others. Here's what's going to happen tonight. I'm going to tell you about the most recent IG Nobel winners, and then we have 2 living IG Nobel Prize winners with us. A third was scheduled, Nadia Dominici, who was coming from Italy by way of Amsterdam, was going to be with us. She's part of the team that won a prize a few years ago for doing an experiment to see whether if people lived on the moon, and if there were lakes and rivers, if those people on the moon could walk on the surface of the water. They did some experiments. So maybe she'll come back here in future. Her young child became ill last night. That's why she could not travel. But we're making up for it. Each of our 2 IG Nobel winners, we stayed up fairly late last night. Each of them has done research on many other things, and they're going to do 2 talks. One talk about the thing that won them their IG Nobel Prize, and then a second talk about some new research on a different topic. And we also have something involving hair, a very special announcement that you'll see in a bit. Now, first, as a sort of background, I want to talk about two Ig Nobel Prize winners from the past. The prizes, in case you're not familiar with them, are for things that make people laugh and then think. That is the only criterion for winning an Ig Nobel Prize. You've done something that makes people laugh and then think. This is a medical report. This was published in a medical journal quite a while ago. And I'll tell you the story of this. You can see the headline, Failure of Electric Shock Treatment for Rattlesnake and Venomation. Right, the words are all pretty clear. If they're not, feel free to ask. Failure of electric shock treatment for rattlesnake and venomation. It is about this man. This was the patient. There were two doctors who wrote about this. The prize went to this man and the two doctors. This man is identified in the report only as Patient X. Patient X was a former military man, former United States Marine. He had a pet rattlesnake, and he was very aware that a rattlesnake can bite you and that can kill you. So he wanted to be very careful to know what he should do in case his rattlesnake bit him. And he did some research. He did all of his research not by going to medical journals, not by talking to doctors, not by reading medical textbooks. No. He read men's magazines, the kind with pictures of naked women and all in them. That's where he got all of his information about how he could save his life if his pet rattlesnake ever bit him. One day, he and a friend got in their Jeep, and they took his pet rattlesnake, and they went out into the country for a walk. And the rattlesnake bit him. The rattlesnake bit him on the lip. But he was prepared. He had done research. And his research told him that if you're ever bitten by a rattlesnake, the way to save your life is to pass electricity through your body at the spot where the snake bit you. So, at this man's insistence, his friend went and got the Jeep, drove it up. They hooked up electrical wires from the Jeep's spark plugs to this man's lip. And then his friend stepped on the accelerator to maximum for 5 minutes, 3,000 RPM. That's what a human looks like after that happened. A helicopter was called. They flew him into a hospital. 2 doctors there saved his life. The doctors were pretty amused after all this and wrote it up. So that's one past winner. This is another. This paper was the subject of the Ig Nobel Psychology Prize in the year 2000. This paper has become pretty famous in many parts of the world. Justin Kruger and David Dunning are the names of the academics who wrote it. The thing they describe has become known around the world as the Dunning-Kruger effect. The title of this paper, as you can see, is Unskilled and Unaware of It, How Difficulties in Recognizing One's Own Incompetence Lead to Inflated Self-Assessments. Let me read that for you again. Unskilled and unaware of it, how difficulties in recognizing one's own incompetence lead to inflated self-assessments. All right. And now we'll look at the most recent group of Ig Nobel Prize winners. The ceremony happened just a few months ago at Harvard University in the US, which is where it happens every year. And this is all about this talk, Improbable Research, which is the name of my magazine, and also everything we do. By improbable, we mean it's not what you expect. Whatever you expect, it's something different. And the Ig Nobel Prizes. All of this is, again, about things that make people laugh and then think. We give 10 prizes a year. We get something like 9,000 or 10,000 new nominations every year. And we think, anyway, it's important that when we choose somebody to win a prize, or when we choose a group to win a prize, we offer it to them. We get in touch with them very quietly. We offer it to them. We give them the chance to say no if they want to. But almost everybody who is offered a prize decides to accept. And so they get an Ig Nobel Prize. This is the Ig Nobel Prize this year. Every year it's a different design. The ceremony, there's an elaborate ceremony. The ceremony always has a theme. It's a new theme every year. Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the things that win the prizes that year, but we do other interesting things during the ceremony. The theme this time was time, and you can see that this reflects that theme of time. It's a clock face. It's rather unusual for a clock. Each of the hands is a sand clock, and you can see there's some physics going on as this thing works. And if you look closely, you might notice that there are 61 seconds on the face of this clock. Every year we include in the ceremony, in addition to announcing the winners, that's the main thing, but in addition to that we do a lot of other things. And one thing we do every year is write a little opera, a new opera about something in science. This year about time, actually about the leap second. I'm not going to go into any detail in the opera, but I wanted to show you a picture of what part of it looked like. It's the two main characters in front. Those people in back are human clocks, and we had them do double duty during the night. They were in the opera as characters, and then we used them later as sort of human timepieces so that each of the speeches during the night could be timed precisely. We also this year had a little competition. The prizes are physically presented at the ceremony by Nobel Prize winners. We had 4 Nobel Prize winners this year. And we always like to give them something extra to do. So this year, one of the many things in the ceremony was a competition for the game called tic-tac-toe. Sorry about that popping P's here. Tic-tac-toe. In some countries it's called noughts and crosses. You may know it by some other name. But we had a competition between several teams. One was an individual, a NASA scientist. This is the NASA scientist. One of her competitors was a brain surgeon. One of the competitors was a team of Nobel laureates. And the fourth competitor was a team of roller derby skaters. Okay. The NASA scientist ended up winning. And there's a long tradition at the ceremony of the audience bringing paper, which they turn into paper airplanes, which they throw at the stage, and the people on stage throw it right back. I noticed that somebody has thoughtfully provided paper with directions on how to turn that paper into paper airplanes. Feel free to indulge if you think you ought to do that. All right, here is a very quick look at the 2016 crop of Ig Nobel Prize winners. The Ig Nobel Prize for Reproduction. It's the first time we've ever given a prize in that field. The Reproduction Prize was won by the late Dr. Ahmed Shafiq of Egypt for testing the effects of wearing polyester, cotton, or wool trousers on the sex life of rats, and for then conducting similar tests on human males. Dr. Shafiq wrote some medical papers about it. This is one of them, the effect of different types of textiles on sexual activity. The next picture I'm going to show you is some detail from this published report. Okay. Right. If anyone here is wearing underwear, you might give a thought for a moment about what kind of material you are wearing and what effect this might have on the future of you and your descendants, if you are going to have any. The Ig Nobel Economics Prize was awarded to a team from New Zealand and the UK. They were honored for assessing the perceived personalities of rocks from a sales and marketing perspective. They published this paper describing everything they did. The paper is called The Brand Personality of Rocks, a critical evaluation of a brand personality scale. Here's some detail from that study. If you find that one or more of the rocks you're looking at seems to have a strong personality, you are not alone. However, the people sitting next to you with that same feeling may not agree with you as to exactly which personality which rock has. We ourselves gathered some pictures of famous rocks that have personalities, which I'll show you in a moment. These are the winners at the Ig Nobel ceremony giving their acceptance speech. And you can see they're holding their Ig Nobel Prize, which you now recognize. Here are some famous rocks. You might ponder for just a moment or two about what personality each of these rocks has. Okay. If you've been there, if you've actually met these rocks, then of course you have a lot of data as to what their personalities are. Is there anyone here who does not know why this slide is here? If you don't know why this slide is here, look around you. Find the youngest person near you and ask that person, and they will explain it to you. Okay? And this. Is there anyone who does not know why this slide is here? All right. If you don't know why this slide is here, look around you. Find the oldest person and ask that person. That person will explain it to you. The Ig Nobel Physics Prize was awarded to a large team from several countries: Hungary, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland. The team is based largely in Hungary. They were honored for discovering why white-haired horses are the most horsefly-proof horses, and for discovering why dragonflies are fatally attracted to black tombstones. They published 2 separate papers on these things. This is one paper called Ecological Traps for Dragonflies in a Cemetery: The Attraction of this Species by Horizontally Polarizing Black Gravestones. This physics investigation was all about light and what happens to light when it bounces off certain substances, certain surfaces, and then what happens when that light enters the eyes of different kinds of insects. Here's some detail from that. Okay. If you've ever hung out in a cemetery and looked at black gravestones, you may have had a similar view. And here's the other paper called An Unexpected Advantage of Whiteness in Horses. The most horsefly-proof horse has a depolarizing white coat. You can get copies of all these things pretty easily off the internet, or you can email me. I'd be happy to send them to you if you have trouble. Here's some detail from that. Any of you with white hair may have discovered much the same thing. Or maybe not, because our hair is not exactly the same as horses' hair. Here is Susanne Åkesson from Sweden, one of the winners at the moment she accepted her prize from one of the Nobel Prize winners. The Ig Nobel Chemistry Prize was awarded to Volkswagen for solving the problem of excessive automobile pollution emissions by electromechanically producing fewer emissions whenever the cars are being tested. The United States government, back when we had a government in the United States, used to investigate things like this, and they published this report, which goes into detail. This, too, you can obtain, or at least you could until recently, off the internet. I don't know if it's still there. The Ig Nobel Medicine Prize was awarded to a team from Germany. They were honored for discovering that if you have an itch on the left side of your body, which you probably do now that I've mentioned that you might have an itch on the left side of your body, if you have an itch on the left side of your body, you can relieve that itch by looking into a mirror and scratching on the right side of your body, and vice versa. This is the paper they wrote about it. The paper is called Itch Relief by Mirror Scratching, a psychophysical study. And here's the lead author at the ceremony giving his acceptance speech, and you can see our human clocks there reminding him that his time is just about up. We give them 1 minute to give their acceptance speech. We thought this was rather a technical subject and that we had better have some sort of demonstration. So we got 2 of the Nobel laureates on stage to allow us to scratch them, to tickle them with a feather. And there are two mirrors here that they were looking into. Okay. You can do this experiment yourself if you have some Nobel laureates nearby, and some mirrors and a feather. The Ig Nobel Psychology Prize was awarded to a large team from Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Canada, and the USA. They were honored for asking 1,000 liars how often they lie and for deciding whether to believe those answers. This is their paper called From Junior to Senior Pinocchio, a cross-sectional lifespan investigation of deception. This is some detail from that. You can see the horizontal axis here is the number of people who fall into certain categories, and then vertically, the number of people is vertical, and across here, it's how many lies per day on average people said they did. And you can see that pretty much everybody lies at least a little bit. Most people, though, just lie a few times, a very few times a day. And it's rare that you find people who lie more than just a few times. But there are some people, there's a small group of people who lie almost all the time. Some of those people are in public life. And this is one of the authors. At the moment, he's accepting his Ig Nobel Prize. The Ig Nobel Peace Prize, which some people consider to be the most prestigious of the Ig Nobel Prizes, was awarded to a team primarily based in Canada. They won for their scholarly study called On the Reception and Detection of Pseudo-Profound Bullshit. Here's a look at their paper, which indeed is called On the Reception and Detection of Pseudo-Profound Bullshit. And here is the team accepting their prize and finishing their acceptance speech. The Ig Nobel Biology Prize was shared by two people, both of them British. One of them is Charles Foster. Charles Foster won his share of the prize for living in the wild as at different times a badger, an otter, a deer, a fox, and a bird. Charles Foster shared his prize with someone else, Thomas Thwaites, who also is British. Thomas Thwaites won his share of the Ig Nobel Biology Prize for creating prosthetic extensions of his limbs that allowed him to move in the manner of and spend time roaming hills in the company of goats. He's the man you saw in the video. Each of them wrote a book that came out recently. This is Charles Foster's book called Being a Beast, and this is Thomas Thwaites, which quite sensibly is called Goat Man. He did this work, he did the research for this and built all this stuff in England, and then he flew to a mountainside in Switzerland, and he lived on a mountainside with goats. That's what these pictures are. This is Charles Foster at the ceremony giving his acceptance speech. If you look down at the right there, you can see his co-winner preparing his own speech. And then here is Thomas Thwaites as a Nobel laureate attempts to hand him his Ig Nobel Prize. And then after he gave his speech, we led him off to a place where he could sit down and relax a little bit and choose some grass if he wanted. Here are some pictures from his experiment in Switzerland. The Ig Nobel Literature Prize was awarded to Frederick Schuberg of Sweden for his 3-volume autobiographical work about the pleasures of collecting flies that are dead and flies that are not yet dead. He published this book. This is the English edition of it. In English, it's called The Fly Trap. Some of you maybe have read this book, or some of his others. And here is Frederick Scherberg accepting his prize. And he's on Monday. We're doing an event similar to this in Stockholm, and he will be part of this, and will presumably explain why flies mean so much to him. The Ig Nobel Perception Prize, the final prize. This was the first time we gave a prize in this field, too. In fact, it's probably the first time anyone has given a prize in the field of perception. Went to 2 Japanese researchers for investigating whether things look different when you bend over and view them between your legs. This is the paper where they describe their research. It's called Perceived Size and Perceived Distance of Targets Viewed from Between the Legs. Evidence for proprioceptive theory. Proprioceptive is a technical word, and I'm guessing that many people in this room have never had any reason to encounter that word, and that at least a few people here know it because you use this in your own work here at the university or wherever you work. If there's one of the people here who understands this word, would you mind just standing up and explaining in a sentence or two for everybody what that word means, proprioceptive? Anybody? Just one person? Is there anyone in psychology? Anyone with a dictionary? Anyone who can read? No?
It's the ability to sense where your body is without
something along those lines, yeah. Yeah. May I ask a favor now? Would you mind coming up here and explaining that while you bend over and look through your legs at the audience?
ability to know where your body is. What is it? No, it's more difficult.
Thank you, Piers. That was Piers Barnes, who won an Ig Nobel Prize, who will speak to you later about his work. You've now just briefly met Piers. Let me introduce very briefly our other Ig Nobel winner, Kees Moeliker. But back to finish up this listing. This is one of the authors of that paper, finishing up his speech. And he too felt it's a difficult thing to explain to people. And so after he finished his speech, he went to the center of the stage and he demonstrated. And we ourselves were worried that people might not understand, even with all that. So we asked our 4 Nobel laureates if they would help with the demonstration, which they kindly did. And I especially am grateful to the man on the right here. That's Roy Glauber, has a Nobel Prize in physics. Roy is, I believe, in his early 90s. And I think it's fair to say he's not quite as limber and stretchy as he was. So this was very nice of him to do that. And at the end of the ceremony every year, we ask all of the winners and all of the Nobel laureates and all of the opera singers and everybody else on stage to gather there for a pointless photo opportunity. That's what you see here. So that's a quick look at the most recent group of Ig Nobel winners. You can see the whole ceremony. We always webcast this live, and recorded versions are up on our website on improbable.com. And you can get a lot more detail there. We also have links to all of these papers. And I've given you just a taste of each of these, but each of these things has so much more detail, and so much of it is so either beautiful or not beautiful, but in interesting ways. The next ceremony is happening in September. September 14th is the 27th first annual Ig Nobel Prize ceremony. It will be webcast live. I hope you will watch it. Hope you'll be able to come over to Cambridge, Massachusetts and see it there. But if you can't, watch it live. It starts at 6 p.m. in Boston, which means it'll be, around midnight here. But that's not so late, is it, for something a little unusual? And every year, all the details of the ceremony, and lots of pictures go into a special issue of our magazine, of the Annals of Improbable Research. And you can see the goat man here too, made the cover of our magazine. The other issues are about many, many other things in every conceivable kind of research and then some. And I hope you'll read the magazine, subscribe. It's now all PDF online, so just go to improbable.com. And if you know something we should be writing about, or if you know something or somebody that deserves an Ig Nobel Prize, tell us, please. That's how we learn about most of these things. Almost everything that you hear about tonight, we heard about because one person somewhere told us. And I'm sure everybody in this room runs across all kinds of unusual things. Please do more than you usually do. What everybody does, you run across something really great and unusual, you tell your 2 or 3 best friends and you forget about it. Well, after you tell your 2 or 3 best friends, tell us, and maybe we'll tell the world. So that's that. And now we're going to move on to the portion of the evening where here's what we're going to do. Each of these 2 Ig Nobel Prize winners will describe to you sort of briefly what they did and why they did it. They will also later, each of them, tell you about a completely different, unrelated kind of research they did. And it's going to be Piers Barnes first talking about his prize-winning research, and then Kees Moeliker about his research. And then we have the grand moment when we will introduce to you and to the world this year's Woman of the Year from the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club. That's something we started quite a number of years ago, and we have the winner here. The winner has not been revealed to anybody before tonight. You will be here at this historic site. And then after that, we'll have 2 brief talks by each of our winners. Piers will tell you about his other piece of research he's done, and then Kees will tell you about his. So here we go. And we want to make sure the speakers speak briefly, so I would like to ask for 2 volunteers to help us keep the time and let the speakers know how time is passing. Each of these first talks will be 15 minutes long. And we have a couple of chairs for that. Are there 2 people who wouldn't mind coming up and just sitting on stage and helping to time this? Just 2 volunteers? Okay, 1 volunteer there, and we need 1 more person. It won't be painful. People might throw a paper airplane at you, but that's about the worst thing that would happen. And that could happen anywhere at any time on the street. You never know. 1 more? Okay. Great. From in the back, please come on down. Yeah, you. Great. Yeah, both of you. And here's how it's going to work. I'll explain while you're walking. 1 of you will be the timer, and 1 of you will announce it. We're going to, so the timer, pay attention when the person starts talking. It's 15 minutes for each of these talks. We want to notify them after 5 minutes go by, and notify them after 10 minutes go by, and then after 14 minutes when they have just a minute left, and then when it's time. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 14 minutes, and then when they're finished. The way we're going to do that, in honor of one of the winners you've just seen, the goat man, if we could just make goat sounds. So we'll sort of walk through a quick rehearsal on this. So after 5 minutes, if you will notify your colleague, and that's 5, and if you could then make 5 goat sounds. And if everybody in the audience who wants to, if you could assist and also with her make 5 goat sounds, that will mean the speaker knows how time is progressing. Maybe we could just rehearse that quickly. So after 5 minutes, you will you notify your colleague in any way you want that's clear. Yeah. Well, let her know how many. 5 minutes. Yeah, and so. But five times. So we'll try 5 times. Yeah. So let's try that again. Okay. Oh, we don't need that for now. Oh, she's got a great. This is a great voice. I would like to shake your hand on that voice. You do, yeah. So after 5 minutes, you let her know. Yeah. Tell her, please. We'll rehearse. Yeah. Okay, good. And let's just rehearse the others so we know how to do this. After 10 minutes, you will tell. Yeah, okay. So, be very clear. Yeah, so let's try that again. So. That is a great voice. After 14 minutes. Good. And that's a good point. It's when you're doing this, it's difficult to count and do that at the same time. It is. Anybody is. We happen to have here one of the world's great mathematicians who I think, if you wouldn't mind, Andreas, every time this happens, come up and help her count with some kind of visual. No, just each time it happens, if you would come up quickly and do that. So, and now we'll try it for 14 minutes. Oh, we did. Okay. Okay, so you come up and do that. And at 15 minutes, start making the sound. Continue making the sound until the person stops talking. Okay? Great. All right. Thank you, and thank you. We're all set. Are we all set? Question?
Does the speaker have to speed up then? Because that's annoying when you.
That's not your problem at all. You don't have to worry about anything. That's the speaker's problem. You and all of us and I are here just to assist the speaker, to let them know how much time is left. Our first speaker is Piers Barnes. He joins us from Imperial College in London. He and a colleague won the Ig Nobel Prize for Mathematics several years ago. Blink, right? They won the Ig Nobel Prize for Mathematics because they calculated how many photographs you need to take when you're taking a picture of a group of people and you want to be pretty sure that at least one of your photographs shows everybody's eyes open, nobody blinking. Here's Piers Barnes. Piers Barnes, excuse me.
Can you hear me? You can hear me. Okay, it's loud. All right. Hello. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's my first time in Norway, and I've been stunned. It's a wonderful country to be in so far. So, as Mark mentioned, I was lucky enough to be awarded an Ig Nobel Prize with Nick Svensson here, my co-winner in 2006. And the problem we set out to tackle is something that I'm sure you're all familiar with, that there is nothing worse than having a great photo opportunity spoilt by somebody blinking. And you're probably all too young to know who these people are, but at one point this was the world's most popular TV show, Baywatch. Anyway, in order to figure out how many shots should you take of a group of people to be sure or pretty certain that nobody's going to be blinking, obviously you need to consider a lot of complicated factors in human behavior and the issues that might affect people's blink rates. Oh, and I should just comment, here is Nick Svensson, my co-winner in Australia, with the Ig Nobel Prize, which was a little rotating ball on a cylinder. Anyway, so in order to tackle this important problem, we had to sort of think about all the things that might affect blink rate, and as it happens, there's some great literature out there on this subject, and this is an example of a paper that I found from 1927, where the authors attached a contraption to the top of their subjects' heads, and it had little springs that were glued onto the eyelids, which had platinum contacts, which when they blinked would make a little electrical connection and register a blink on a recorder here, and these little spikes represent blinks, and this is time advancing on this axis. So each of these is a second, and you can see that they were blinking. Apparently the subjects eventually stopped noticing. And what they noticed was that different subjects had different distributions of blinking frequency. So we're looking at the interval, so time between blinks and how often it occurs. So here you can see this person has lots of short interval blinks and fewer long blinks or long intervals, whereas this person has lots of sort of longer intervals between their blinks. So there are different blinking characteristics out there. They also looked at things like smoking, and they found, interestingly, cigarette smoke had some kind of influence on blink rate and made you blink more frequently. They also even went into Turkish baths to observe people blinking in steam. Here we are. They tried the effects of cocaine. Surprisingly, nothing happened. No difference between A and B. And so they then had to observe people in difficult situations. And this one I particularly liked from this paper. They analyzed the effect of experimentally induced impotent anger. They don't say how they induced it, but it's very clear that when they induced the anger in the subjects, the blink there were far more or less time between the blinks, and we see an increase in the blink frequency there. And then they somehow just stop the anger, and it goes back to normal. So we basically abandoned all of that great research that's been done, and we boiled our solution down to a very simple formula, which was, okay, how many shots should I take of a group of 20 people, and to be sure nobody's blinking? And our answer was this, really simple. If the light's bad, divide the number of people in the group by 2, take that number of shots, and you'll be more than 95% sure that one of them is blink-free. In good light, just divide by 3. There's your answer, simple. Now, at this point, my co-winner, Nick Svensson, would normally stop me from going into all the details of how we arrived at this wonderful rule. But she's not here today, so I'm going to subject you to a little bit of the details. So we can imagine that there's a time during which a blink is spoiled. That's about during which photo is okay. So there's a duration about quarter of a second when a person blinks, and then there's a time when the camera shutter might be open, and we can add those together to give the total time window during which a photo could be spoiled. So that's T. And so I'm just, I like this math stuff. So we've got our probability that a single photo could be spoiled by a single person, P given by the rate of blinking, X multiplied by T. That's an approximation. And so the probability of no blink is 1 minus XT. And for a group of lots of people, we can then raise that to the power of n, the number of people in the group. So we've got a sort of simple formula for telling us what the probability that one photo is going to be good. So we want to then know, okay, how many shots should we take for a larger group? And we've got a slight. It's actually pretty simple. Okay, sorry, excuse me. Hello. Yeah, Mum. It's not a good time right now. Yeah, I left the cheese. Look, Mum, can I call you back later? Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, as you can guess, that was probably a sort of setup, because what I'm trying to do here is indicate the the amazing potential of this research to be applied to other areas. So we can think about the probability that a talk will be spoiled by somebody's phone going off. So if maybe you could all turn on your phones. To be honest, this is now quite outdated research because nobody makes phone calls anymore. Back in the day, back in the noughties, people used to use their mobile phones. Now they just text messages. But in principle, we can calculate the chances that an event will be spoiled by somebody calling during it. And it's the same concept. So in 2009, an average person would have about 3.9 incoming calls per waking day. And so we can calculate the rate at which those calls come through. And, okay, I don't know if there are 300 people here. I forgot to update with an estimation of the numbers. But if we had 300 people, we might expect 3.1 calls a minute to come through. As I say, this was 2009. Nowadays, no. Nowadays, nobody calls. But back then, it was about right. So we can then calculate how long into an event before the event is likely to be interrupted by a call. And this suggests that the probability after 5 minutes, we can expect an event to be that there will definitely have been calls. But experience tells us normally calls don't come through quite this quickly. So if we look at the difference between the rate at which calls actually come through and the rate that they should come through, knowing how often people receive phone calls, we can make some interesting calculations. Now, this is a reference to a joke that physicists sometimes make. The punchline of the joke is that the farmer asks the physicist how to improve his milk production, and the physicist comes back after months of deliberation and says, assuming a spherical cow. So you know immediately that the answer is going to be questionable. So if we assume a spherical cow in this case, we can come to some quite interesting conclusions. So if we take the expected rate of incoming calls, and there's still been no calls come through here. So yeah, really a lot has changed in the last 10 years. Okay. Okay. If we take the rate of incoming calls and we assume it's constant through the wakeful day for everybody, and then we consider that people actually often turn off their phones during an event. So the call in a talk or a lecture, we wouldn't expect to hear a call. And we also consider that if somebody else's phone goes off, it might remind you to turn yours off or turn the sound off so you wouldn't hear it. So we can define something on this basis. An inconsideracy factor, which is the forgetfulness plus the rudeness. So, and just to define those, forgetfulness, so a rudeness is when you hear somebody else's phone go off, but you don't turn yours off, knowing that it's still on, if that makes sense. And so we can calculate our inconsideracy factor by taking the observed incoming call rate during an event and dividing it by the expected incoming call rate. And from this, we can calculate our inconsideracy factor of the human race. And I asked a load of friends who whenever they went to a talk, I asked them to record the number of phone calls that went off in that event. And then also count the number of people who were attending and the duration of the event. So we could take all the data. From that, I can say that the inconsideracy factor of the human race is about 0.12. And so we can boil that down to another rule of thumb. And with that, I'd like to thank you all very much. I think I'm under time.
We have time for a very few questions, and we have a microphone here. If you have a question, raise your arm, and the microphone will be brought to you. Just raise your arm if you have a question, or if you feel like you want to raise your arm. Okay, question here. If you could wait till the microphone comes. We're webcasting this. Okay. The world is watching and listening.
What is the sigma on that research?
Here, the 0.1, so the massive uncertainty. Sorry? Oh, I think it was from the standard deviation of the standard deviation of the. It's a long time ago now. Yeah, the standard deviation of the number of calls that came in during an event, or during the totalized number of events, if that makes sense. I'd have to actually go and consult my spreadsheet. Right. But it wasn't a very strong statistical analysis.
Okay. Next question.
Have you taken into consideration different events, such as university lectures versus funerals?
This was all academic settings, I'm afraid. So I can't. In principle, I shouldn't extrapolate to funerals.
Academic funerals?
Did I say academic funerals?
You did now. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Piers Barnes. And a little later, Piers will speak to us about a very different piece of research that he did. Our next speaker won the Ig Nobel Biology Prize in the year 2003. He studies birds. That's his main interest scientifically. He's an ornithologist. He is also, at the time, he was the curator of the Natural History Museum in the city of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. He has since become the director of the museum. He saw something unusual one day and took notes and published a paper about it. Because of that paper, he was awarded the Ig Nobel Prize. All the way down. That one? Okay. There we go. He was awarded the prize for publishing the first scientifically recorded case of homosexual necrophilia in the mallard duck. Please welcome Kees Moeliker.
So this is the Natural History Museum in Rotterdam, where I worked as a curator till a year ago. Now I'm the director. So you can see Ig Nobel Prize winners can move up. And it's a classic natural history museum. It has lots of skeletons, fossils, insects, plants, you name it. And we have a lot of stuffed birds. And I really like stuffed birds because you can study them and they don't fly away, basically. And back in 1995, the museum got a new building, a new extension, and it was all made of glass. And this new building was very, very profitable for the museum collection. And that's because birds crashed into this building and died. And it's because they don't have the perception of glass that we have. I mean, they see it as an extension of their habitat or a reflection of it, and they just don't get it, that it kills them. So back in those days, we were of course in the first place very, very annoyed by all these dead birds, and we tried to solve it. But the thing we used these stickers, these plastic stickers, to put on the glass, but they didn't work because we didn't have so many. I mean, you have to put these stickers every 10 centimeter. And look at it's a beautiful piece of architecture, and the architect didn't really agree with us. So I said to myself, every bird that gets killed gets a place in the collection. And then it was fun for me. So in those days, in those years, I developed an absolute ear for the sounds birds make when they crash into the glass. And on June 5th, 1995, at 5 to 6 p.m., I heard a tremendous loud bang against the glass, and I said to myself, this is something special. And it was something special. When I looked out of my window, I saw this. This is the victim of the glass. It's a dead duck, a mallard duck. But next to the dead duck was a live duck. Then this happened. The live duck mounted the dead duck and started to copulate. Well, I'm an ornithologist. I know my bird literature. One is dead, one is alive. That's necrophilia. Okay? If you look careful, you can see both of them are of the male sex. Homosexual necrophilia. So I took a chair, took my camera, my notebook. I went down to observe it from behind the glass. I could do so for 75 minutes. 75 minutes. I'm not sure if you ever saw copulation in the mallard. It takes about 10 seconds, that's it. In this case, 75 minutes. After 75 minutes, I had seen enough. I took my notes, took my pictures, and I was getting hungry and wanted to go home. Before I left the museum, I checked and of course collected the victim and checked the sex of the duck. And here you see a rare picture of a duck's penis. Are you familiar with genital morphology in ducks? Or in birds in general? No? Well, there are 10,000 bird species worldwide, and only 300 possess a penis. And among those privileged are the ducks. So, indeed, of the male sex. Here are my notes, and I have to confess that I kept my notes in my drawer in my office for about 6 years before I decided to publish my observations. I didn't have a framework. I didn't know about homosexuality in the animal kingdom, let alone necrophilia. There wasn't any literature, nothing. So I told the story at the coffee machine or at birthday parties. That's it. Then this book came out. 1,200 pages filled with examples of homosexual. That's 5. Good. 1,200 pages filled with homosexual behavior in the animal kingdom. And then I had my framework and I decided to publish the first case of homosexual necrophilia in the mallard duck. It's a case report. Here is the situation again. A is my office. B is where the duck hit the glass. And from C, I observed it. Here are the ducks again. Well, as you know, in science, when you publish a paper, 6 or 7 people read it, and that's it. So I've kind of forgot all about the ducks, forgot about this paper, until I got an email from a person called Marc Abrahams, asking me for a conversation about my duck paper. So indeed, we ended up emailing, and I was kind of puzzled in the first place. So he told me that I'd won a prize, an IG Nobel prize, and I checked it. I said, this email comes from Harvard. Shouldn't it come from Stockholm? No, Didn't come from Stockholm. So I got this prize and I gladly accepted it, but I never won a prize. I mean, if you win a prize, it's something great. And so I went to the ceremony, and it's my pleasure to present to you the duck. It's his first time in Norway, and I think that you all look pretty into natural history, so I'll just give it, and you can pass it through. Yeah, careful. Okay, don't do anything with it that you wouldn't do to your children. And here's my prize, the 2003 Ig Nobel Prize in the field of biology. It's a beautiful piece of work. This is a picture from about 10 years ago. I think now it's kind of disintegrated. And there's also the certificate signed by Nobel laureates, and that's a thing to put on your wall. Yeah. After winning this Ig Nobel Prize, my life changed in a positive way. People were sending me all kinds of duck-related stuff. I have a this was 2003, so it's a long time ago, and I have a huge collection of all kinds of duck-related stuff, and it's very, very broad. Very good. But more importantly, and this is really the good part of this, is that people send me their observations of remarkable animal behavior. And I've said it before, and I will say it here. If an animal misbehaves on this planet, I know about it. And I'm going to give you some examples. This is mating mistakes. They call them mating mistakes. This is a moose trying to copulate with the bronze statue of a bison. This is in Montana in 2006. And I always check these reports, and I called up the owner of the statue, and he said that both the statue and the moose were damaged in this event. Yeah. Here's a frog trying to copulate with a goldfish. This was back in the Netherlands 3 years ago. And here's probably the first ever published case of necrophilia in the bird world, in the animal kingdom. It was done by Merrick Levick, a British explorer who spent the year 2011 on the South Pole studying penguins. And here you see what he saw in the sexual act upon the dead body of a white-throated elderly, and even down to the final depression of the cloaca and emission of semen. And this was 2011 published in Victorian England. And he was the first ever to describe it. Here are barn swallows in Hong Kong. Beautiful pictures. The guy who took these pictures thought that the one on top tried to revive a family member. Thank you. 10. Okay. Here are pigeons. This is something you can pretty easily see anywhere where there are feral pigeons. It's a necrophiliac copulation, but you see the pattern is as if there was no death involved. This is the smallest bird we have in Europe. It's the goldcrest. It's about this size, 6 grams. A recent observation from Belgium, beautifully videoed. And here is another case of necrophilia in the mallard duck. This was downtown Antwerp on broad daylight. Here he goes. Yeah. And people were just staring at it. People were just staring at it. And somebody took some beautiful pictures. This is a turkey. This is in the US. This is heterosexual necrophilia. The one below is a female. The female collided with an electric fence of a prison, and these pictures were taken by prisoners who had a good time because it took whole day. It's an old report from the US also, from experiments they did with the turkey. And well, to boil it down to the bare basics, a turkey will even mate with a dried head of a female. Just the side of the dried head of the back side of the side of a head of a turkey female. In cane toads, observed in Australia, 1959, has been part of a beautiful movie, has been reenacted in the movie called The Cane Toads. And here are some recent observations from Australia. A roadkill. This is, I mean, in these frogs and toads, it's not that uncommon, but the position, the missionary position, is very, very uncommon in the animal kingdom. Here's a ground squirrel in America, 59. And if you look at the title of the paper, Deviant Behavior Complex, I was puzzled by this report, Deviant Behavior Complex. Why didn't he call it necrophilia? I called the guy up and I asked him the question, why do you call it deviant behavior? He said, well, this was the US back in the 1960s. I couldn't write down the word necrophilia in an academic journal. So he came up with deviant behavior. I said, well, what the hell, what's deviant behavior? It's because of a limerick, which was popular at that time. Okay. And this was Robert Dickerman, who died 2 years ago. But in fact, he gave necrophilia a good name. This is the first case of necrophilia in the rabbit. It's from the Netherlands. Well, how does it work? How do we start it? Oh, this precious time. Okay. Yeah.
Why stop there?
Go on. Time's up.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can get this to work. Apparently not.
No.
Sorry. Well, we tried.
Can we make it bigger or?
I don't know.
No. Okay. Well, maybe afterwards we can do it. Sorry. Sorry for the technique. Okay. Well, thank you for this. If you ever see something that you do not trust or you want to share with me, please send it over. Sorry. Okay.
If anyone has a question about this, this would be a good time to ask it. Just raise your arm, please. Yes. Could Kees have his duck back? Yeah, okay. Question up here. If you could wait till the microphone gets up to you. The microphone is flying up to you. Okay. And if anyone else has questions, raise your arm so we know where you are.
Hi. I was wondering, have you ever seen, well, I guess you wouldn't have couple formation in sort of dead animals with necrophilia, but have you seen sort of aberrant, not aberrant, but like behavior like homosexuality and stuff in the animal kingdom where they form long-term couples rather than, just an act? I was just...
No, don't finish there. What do you mean by long-term? necrophiliac couple.
No, that's why I said it probably wouldn't work for necrophilia. But
Yeah, but when you say it probably wouldn't, you're also saying it might.
well, if you come back to the skeleton, I don't know if.
The case?
Yeah, well, when death is involved, it's always a short story. But in homosexual relationships, they can last very long, and there are cases of flamingos and swans that stay forever. Yeah.
Okay. Was that a satisfactory answer? Yes. Very okay. Thanks. Okay. The question right behind you, and then one down in the front.
I recently saw on the BBC Earth, the copulation between a seal and a penguin. And it seems that the seal was killing the penguin after the sexual interact. Is it considered as necrophilia?
No, technically it's not.
Well, let me interrupt here. Are you asking from the biological point of view or from the legal point of view?
I'm not a legal expert, so I wouldn't know about that. But
yeah, well, my files contain now about 80 cases in 25 animal species, but I always count the. The act has to start when the underlying partner is dead.
Okay. Is there a question in the front? And are there any other questions on this? Okay, this will be the final question on this topic.
So do you know anything about what's the average compilation time if it's homophilic necrophilia or heterophilic necrophilia?
Well, technically it's not there's no big difference between if that's a male or the female, because the birds, they have just one multifunctional opening. It's a cloaca. Whether it's male or female doesn't matter. So there's no time difference. Yep. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Kees Moeliker. Now it's time for a bit of history to unfold before our very eyes. We're going to be talking about the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Scientists. I'll give you just the briefest introduction. We formed the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Scientists about 14 or 15 years ago, I guess. To be a member, you need two things. You need to have luxuriant flowing hair, and you need to be a scientist. It has several hundred members from around the world. They sent in their photographs. Here are a few of them. And over the years, the club has expanded to have several sibling clubs. There is the Luxuriant Former Hair Club for Scientists, the Luxuriant Facial Hair Club for Scientists, and the Luxuriant Flowing Former or Facial Hair Club for Social Scientists. There are several members in Norway, and in particular in this very city. This is Annalene Kuhl from the University of Oslo. You can see her hair on display here as she is seated on a camel. She is going to be joining us in a moment to speak a few words about the role of hair and science in her life and perhaps in yours. And she wants to join me in urging you, if you're qualified, to join. Just go to our website and the information's there. But basically just send us in a good photograph and a pointer to your qualifications as an actual scientist. So that's a quick introduction to the club. Some years, not every year, the club, the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Scientists, chooses a man of the year and a woman of the year. Today is the day when we reveal to the world the 2017 Woman of the Year for the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Scientists. You may have seen something that the library here prepared, a beautiful little video to anticipate this moment. And to show this to you. You may have seen it as you walk in. Here we go. And of course, the computer is not too thrilled about whatever. Let me start that over again. Just push the picture like this. Turn the sound off on that. Thank you. And good. Okay. It's my pleasure, my privilege to introduce to you, entering from the rear of the room, the 2017 Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Women and Men for Scientists Woman of the Year, Dr. Annelien Kuhl. Thank you, Dr. Kuhl. Here's your microphone.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. It's an incredible honor to be awarded the Woman of the Year award in the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Scientists. And I have a few other scientists joining me here on stage who are members of the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Scientists. And one of them... And it's not the first time that I've been completely overwhelmed by something that had to do with the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Scientists, because when I became a member of this club, I was given this beautiful hairbrush, and I was nominated by a person we have here on stage, and it's Dr. Alison Perigo, a very hairy person right here. So it was fantastic that she could join us here today. She took these pictures, and they were taken in Jordan, where we took pictures of being hairy. And this is a picture in front of the 7 pillars of wisdom in a desert in Jordan, which is like connecting hair and science very closely. Normally, when I'm not completely absorbed by being hairy, I'm a botanist at the botanical garden at the Natural History Museum here in Oslo. And you see that you can use plants as great hair substitutes when you need to. There's also a couple of plants that have some proven effects on hair growth, at least on rats, but feel free to try. And I was very happy to hear that there was a Ig Nobel Peace Prize awarded for adopting the legal principle that plants have dignity in Switzerland. And then I was very amazed that this goat person got a prize as well, because this goat person was obviously eating these plants. So that's quite disturbing, but I'll talk to Marc about that later. I use my hair a lot in daily life. I work on Viking botany, on the plants that the Vikings used. And I try to make my colleagues a bit more hairy if they don't have any hair. So that's being hairy has been a great thing. I'll send this award around in the audience, because you could use it a little bit to brush your hair a little bit and just see it. And it would be great if you collect a couple of lice, if you find any as well. We'll get back to that later. So here on the stage we have Andreas, who has former hair, and we have Alison, who still has hair. And then we have Dimitar, who's also working at the Natural History Museum. He's our hairy spider man. He works on hairy spiders. And we would like to end with asking Piers if he could take a couple of pictures of us from behind, where we are not blinking. And to make sure that we can get a group photo. If there's any members of the audience who would like to join the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Scientists in the near future, please come and join the group photo. That would be...
please do. No. If you have luxuriant flowing hair,
if you have
this
luxuriant
is a good
flowing
time.
hair and you're a scientist, please join.
If you could come up and... Yep. And if you could all gather here
or facial hair, or former hair.
Yeah. You should get in the middle here. Yeah.
So the,
And anybody else who has luxuriant flowing hair or former luxuriant flowing hair who would like to come, you yourself, you seem like a good candidate if you like. Well, feel free.
We can also look through our legs, but then we might blink.
That would be a second picture.
So we can blink. Oh, okay, we'll do this.
Okay. Anyone else would like to take a picture too? This is a good time. Make a goat sound.
How many pictures?
Okay, and between your legs? Yeah. One more.
Come on, Piers.
Okay? Okay, thank you very much. The members of the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Women and the 2017 Woman of the Year. All right. We, as I explained at the beginning, we had a third Ig Nobel Prize winner who was going to join us, Nadia Dominici, but was not able to because of an illness in her family. So Kees and Piers each have prepared a brief lecture. It will be 5 minutes. Is that? Will 5 minutes do? How long? You won't get 10. Will 5 minutes do? Okay, they're going to do a brief lecture. So we will notify them at 5 minutes, and at 9 minutes, and at 10 minutes. Okay? All right. Here is Piers Barnes on a topic that's new.
Okay. This is very untested material. I don't know if it'll be of interest or not, but it's something that I've wondered about from time to time, partly stimulated by giving talks like this. And the problem is indicated by this photograph here. So for those of you who give talks in maybe academic settings, you'll sometimes notice that all the students go to the back of the lecture theatre, or it's not unusual to see that. And I began to, I'm a physicist and I work on materials, and I began to wonder, okay, are there some physical principles that could be applied here to understand this behavior? And in particular, what I wondered was, do scientists or students obey Fermi-Dirac statistics? And for those of you who are not familiar with Fermi-Dirac statistics, they're a way of describing fermions and their occupation of energy levels. So a fermion is a type of subatomic particle or a fundamental particle, and there are also bosons. And there's a key difference between fermions and bosons, which is bosons can occupy the same state with the same energy, and fermions have to occupy different energetic states. Two fermions can't have precisely the same energetic state and other quantum states. So an electron is an example of that. And I wondered, okay, well, humans occupy a space, so they can't overlap. They can't be in precisely the same position. So maybe we can use Fermi-Dirac statistics. Let's see. Okay, and we call the maximum occupied state the Fermi energy. Maybe we can use Fermi-Dirac statistics to describe the seating patterns in a lecture theatre. So if we, this is what the Fermi-Dirac statistics look like. So 0 is the probability that a state is occupied, or sorry, this axis represents the occupancy, where 0 is an unfilled state and 1 is a filled state. And we could, and here is the energy of our particles. We could change that to anticipation of the coming lecture. So the more anticipation you have, the more excited you are, the more likely you are to be right at the front. And so occupancy then is whether the seat is occupied or empty. And so at the back of the theatre, we can see that there are more occupied states, and at the front, empty states. And so I wondered, okay, is this a reasonable description of how people sit in lecture theatres? Here we can see maybe there's something else going on. Anyway, I had an opportunity to gather some data at a scientific conference, and it was actually the perfect setting because there was a gallery around the top of the lecture theatre, and you could look down and I could take photos. Instead of watching the interesting talks going on, I could take pictures where everyone was sitting, and they were also sitting in these nice little blocks, which added another element to the study. So I took lots of shots. There was an average occupancy of just over a third, and they were photochemists, photophysicists, mostly male, I'm afraid, and only about quarter female. And I took pictures from 4 different sessions, and here is an example from one session. Here are the blocks of people. Blue circles are occupied by men, pink circles occupied spaces by women. And I've used some nice gender stereotyped pink and blue, so I apologize for that. Okay, so could we describe the patterns that people sat in? Not really. So back of the theatre, it doesn't look perfect. In principle, we'd expect the back of the theatre to be completely filled up, particularly if there was no excitement. If people were more excited about the lecture, maybe there would be a bigger spread. So it doesn't look perfect. And if we try and fit a no excitement function to that, it looks terrible. If we increase our anticipation energy or our level of anticipation, the fit still looks pretty ropey, I would say. So I then wondered, okay, let's have a look. The first session, we can see, was much more occupied than the next session. So in the morning, there were far more people sitting at the front than in the afternoon, and indeed there were fewer people. So we can also. We can also see, yeah, there were fewer people in total, and so more free spaces, but there were also fewer people right at the front. So I just wondered, okay, maybe there's something we could assess how good a lecture course is by where people sit, and you could just figure out whether people were really liking it or not just by looking at that distribution. But of course, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, what about row blocking effects? And we've all wondered about things like this, I know. And I think we can safely say there's a very clear case of that here, that all the seats on the edges are more or less empty. And so you can see that somebody sitting at the edge of the row is going to impede further people getting into that row. And it'll make it less likely that future people are going to sit there. So when we look at the statistics measured in columns, just in each of those blocks, we can see indeed there is a significantly higher concentration of people sitting on the edges of rows than in the center. But we also notice something else interesting from these statistics. There's another second peak 2 seats in. Okay, and you can only obviously measure this if you don't have complete occupancy in your lecture theatre. Okay, so 2 seats in, we've got another peak. This makes us think, okay, are there some interpersonal forces between everybody? Is there a kind of optimum distance people like to sit from each other? So let's just make some hypotheses and we can test them. Scientists can freely choose where they sit for this lecture. They possess attractive and repulsive forces. and scientists are sexually ambivalent and, of course, only interested in science. So how can we analyze this? Well, I thought it might be interesting to use something that people in the physical scientists sometimes use to look at things like liquids. And here they use what are called pair correlation functions. And that's a way of analyzing how far particles are from each other. And it's a way of estimating the typical separations between particles. So here we've got separation. Here we've got the probability that two particles will be separated by a given amount. And if everything were uniform, that would go to 1. But we can see there's actually some structure in this pattern. And so there's a sort of typical distance, and then it repeats itself. And that structure tells us about, in this case, a sort of liquid or amorphous arrangement. So we can apply this same kind of analysis to people sitting in rows. And here's what the average analysis looked like. It looks quite different from what we just saw there. So remember, 1 is what we would expect from an entirely random distribution. And what we see is at 13 seats separation, so that's the ends of the rows, that's where people most like to sit. So that's the row blocking effect. But there's also something else here, interestingly. On this separation of 1 seat, there are fewer people. People don't seem to, or at least in this audience, that audience, people didn't like to. Okay, so people didn't like to sit next to each other. But let's break down that data a bit more. So there's the row blocking. Let's look at how the sexes turned out. Okay, this is really interesting. Look at this. The men block the rows, and the women sit together. So the pair distribution between the women indicates that they're more likely to sit next to each other, and the men like to sit apart from each other. When we do the stats and compare the chances of sitting next to a man or a woman relative to a random distribution in that particular configuration, what we see is the women really like to sit next to each other. The men seem to sit separately. So I'll come to my conclusions. Okay. I'm going to click the last thing.
No, you're not, because you ran out of time.
Oh.
But now we have time for just a couple of questions. Of course, you could ask him something about what he was going to say if you want. There's a question here. Microphone is coming up, and questions down here.
Are there any difference between doing this exercise in England or in Italy?
Yeah, I mean, this was that exercise was in Berlin actually, and it was a highly international, I guess, predominantly European sample. I can imagine that there might well be, national differences. But if anyone's prepared to do a bit more number crunching and data collection, I'm sure we could turn it into a more complete and thorough study.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm interested in how you publish these papers. Maybe it's for
so this is not published. This is the first time this has been aired.
But the previous paper, the one you got the award for.
The previous one went.
I wonder about where do you publish it and how is the review process?
Yeah, that went into a children's science magazine. The story was my co-winner Nick Svensson was a science communicator, and she didn't have very good close-up eyesight. So when she took photos, she couldn't tell if people were blinking or not. So she came to this division of physicists and said, "Can someone give me a formula?" And then she presented it on Australian radio, and then we published a short article in a children's science magazine, which somehow got, and it was called Velocity, and it's now been taken offline, unfortunately. We need to find the
banned research.
I think it's archived. There's
archived
there's
banned research.
There's an email address you can contact. Anyway, somehow these guys found out about it. I have no idea how.
And final question on this topic. And then our final speaker will be Kees Moeliker, talking about a subject some of you probably know far too well to hear more about, pubic lice. The question on this.
Have you considered that a lecture is a point source, so you have to do a two-dimensional Fermi-Dirac calculation?
I did think about doing a two-dimensional. Two-dimensional Fermi-Dirac.
Yeah, because you have two dimensionals that it acts upon, since it's a point source and not a line.
I see what you mean. Yeah, that's a good thought, actually. yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Piers Barnes. Thank you. Now our final speaker will be Kees Moeliker about a very different research project he conducted a few years ago, different from the duck work, about pubic lice. If you have any questions about pubic lice that you have not been able to get answered until now, perhaps at the end of this you'll be able to get them answered. 5 minutes, I believe we had for that? So 10 minutes. Is that what we did for the last one? Okay, so 10 minutes on this, the same 5 minutes, 9 minutes, and 10. Yeah. Okay. Right here. I'll get it. There we go. Kees Moeliker.
Thank you. Okay. This is a paper that I ran across in 2006 or 2007, and it caught my attention because of the title. Did the Brazilian kill the pubic louse? I was kind of puzzled by that. Turned out that it wasn't the Brazilians who wiped out the pubic lice, but it was a way of removing one's pubic hair that caused a decline in the pubic lice population. These were two doctors from England who saw this happen in their clinic for sexually transmitted infections. And I was really gripped by this paper. It combines all kinds of good things. First, here's the pubic louse. If you're not familiar with it, it's an insect. It's a parasitic insect that only lives, or basically only lives, in human pubic hair. This is the first author of the paper, Dr. Nicola Armstrong. She deserves an applause for doing this research. This is the prime habitat of pubic lice, good old pubic hair. This is what they get nowadays. Not only in female, also in the male population. And as a biologist, I call this deforestation. Habitat destruction. And this is the species, the pubic louse. One of the questions that rose among the public about the decline of the pubic louse is, why don't they crawl up into the hair of your head? Well, and the answer is in the morphology of these insects. If you look at the shape of the claws, you see that's angular. Yeah? Well, I can give you a little demonstration about what's the effect of this morphology. Because there is a big difference between the hair on your head and your pubic hair. If you take a hair from your head, please do it. Yeah, just one hair. And roll it through your fingers. You feel it's round and soft. Yeah? Got the feeling? Okay. Now reach through your pubic hair. Or ask your neighbor, or do it at home. If you roll a pubic hair through your fingers, you will feel it's hard and coarse and angular. And that's the reason why this creature doesn't get a grip on the hair of your head. Here you see, it's all niche where they live. So after reading this paper, I looked into the collection of the Natural History Museum, and we have like 200,000 insect specimens, but we didn't have a single pubic louse. So I called out to the public, bring the last of the pubic louse to the museum in Rotterdam. This went big. And this was the first sample that we got from a 51-year-old patient, probably a male. This is a navel, and here you see a healthy pubic louse population. They were all collected for us. And this is now what we have. We have about, this is now going on for 10 years. We have about 15 samples from the Netherlands and Belgium. And today I visited the Natural History Museum, the Zoological Museum here in Oslo, to see what's the situation of the Norwegian pubic louse, the heritage of that. And I'm very proud to present to you that the national collection, the National Zoological Collection of Norway, has managed to keep 2 specimens in their collections. One from 1977 from the north, Bodø, and one from Fredrikstad from the south. And these are 77, 78 from the good old days. The good old days of the pubic louse. So I congratulate this country for this tremendous effort to keep them in their collections. So if you ever come across some more, my slide is from in the Netherlands, but I would say bring those specimens to the Zoological Museum here in Oslo. Thank you very much.
Questions? Questions? That you will ask on behalf of a friend, of course. Questions? Question in front.
Is there an issue amongst the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club?
I think there's somebody else who perhaps should come down and answer that. Would the Woman of the Year, please? And perhaps if you could use the same microphone.
I think we need another hair club. To save the pubic louse. We'll need a luxuriant flowing pubic hair club. So if you any volunteers, send an email to Marc and
wow. It's been 12, 15 years that the Luxuriant Flowing Hair Club for Scientists has been in existence. This is the first time anyone has suggested this. If anyone would like to join, you can get in touch with us through the website, or you can contact our local representative, who is a trained biologist and as such is skilled in collecting specimens and preserving them. No one? Well, we'll be around afterwards, and the lights will be dark. Yeah, what am I saying? Anything else you'd like to say about this?
No, not really.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other... Oh, Kees, I'm sorry, you were going to answer the question. I completely interrupted you.
Well, maybe you can start by sending some hair samples, and they can also be collected. So I think that's the way in between.
Okay, I have a question for everybody. Hearing this talk about lice, and which they are related to head lice, has anyone been feeling their head is itchy? I've been noticing several of you. You're probably okay. All right, any final question on the topic of pubic lice? or anyone like to make a public statement? No? All right. Thank you very much, Kees Moeliker.
Thank you.
Could I ask all of our speakers to come and stand up here? Piers, Kees, Annelien, all of our hair club members, come stand up here, take a bow. And also our timers, if you could stand and take a bow. Please, a round of applause for all of these gracious people. Okay. All right. I would like to thank Andreas for organizing this, thank the math department and the library, and all the tech people here who made this work. Thank you all very much for coming. If you know of somebody who you believe should receive an Ig Nobel Prize, please get in touch with us. Let us know. Thank you. Good night. Okay.